here. I know it's been a pretty loaded session with the last one. We're talking about different sifat and makharij and how they apply. And as we said earlier, this thing takes time with practice. So what better way to do it than practice? So just a quick question. What's the difference between, we'll just go around and ask and see how we are. What's the main difference between tafkhim and tarqiq? Or heavy and light letters in terms of sifat? Like how can you make a heavy letter and how can you make a light letter? Any volunteers?
At my own expense, I'll try and say one is the heavy letter, like you're using a lot of space in the mouth, or like you're echoing a little bit.
Yep, pretty much. And obviously, to get a lighter one, you just do the opposite of that. Okay, that's all good. Probably another one in English. What for articulation points? What are in Arabic we call them huruf al-safir or the whistling letters? Any guesses?
Seen would be one of them.
Yep, the seen, that's one of them. Any other letters?
Sod.
Yep. Nearly there, one more. Okay, I'll probably do the other one. It's Zay. Seen, Sod, and Za. So that's three with regards to the whistling letters. Okay. I'll do probably the last one. And there's some wisdom behind this, hopefully come through. What are huruf al-inhiraf, or basically the letters that actually deviate in terms of pronunciation? So it's how do I say this? So in terms of their articulation, the voice changes over time, the sound of the letter.
Laam is one of them, isn't it?
Yep, that's the one, Laam, and the other one is
Ra.
yep. That's basically it. Okay. So just to give you a heads up, makharij and articulation points, which is makharij, or sifat, which is the characteristics. This will carry on for the next few sessions, and it can be quite heavy, but like I said, with practice, we'll pick up the sifat and whatnot. The reason why I dropped everything on you in one go was quite a lot, probably 20 something pages, maybe 30. And it can be a bit intimidating to some people, and I do understand that. And there are shortcuts for this. And what we tend to do for people is that this book, like I said, it is written for a PhD, for a university level. And likewise, the expectation is like you're supposed to demonstrate solid understanding of the letters so that you can actually end up, say, teaching them to people, whether they're teachers or adults. So let me try to come up with an example. So I just read 20 something pages. This thing will carry on for another at least 40 pages, not including practice. So tally that up, that's probably about 3 hours, right? Would that be fair enough to say? No, not 3 hours, maybe 3 to 4 hours minimum, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So let me just see. So I'll just read this to you in Arabic. It might not make sense to some of you folks. I'd like somebody to have maybe a quick timer. You got a timer on you, Musa?
Naam.
Okay. Yalla, bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Yeah, when you're ready, just give me a shot. Just tell me when to start.
Bismillah.
يلا بسم الله. باب مخارج الحروف. مخارج الحروف 17 على الذي يختاره من اختبر. ألف الجوف وأختها واهي حروف مد للهواء تنتهي ثم لأقصى الحلق همز هاء ثم لوسطه فعين حاء أدناه غين خاؤها والقاف، أقصى اللسان فوق ثم الكاف، أسفل والوسط فجيم الشين يا، والضاد من حافاته إذ واليا، للدراسة من أيسار أو يمناها، واللام أدناها لمنتهاها، والنون من طرفه تحت جعل، والراء يدانيه لظهر أدخل، والطاء والدال وتا من هو من عليا الثنايا والصافير مستاكن، من هو من فوق الثنايا السفلى، والضاء والذال وثال العليا، من طرفيهما ومن بطن الشافة، الفاء مع أطراف الثنايا المشرفة، للشافتين واو باء ميم، وغنات مخراجها الخيشوم. أبو صفات الحروف والصفات. صفاتها جهر ورخو مستافل، منفاتيح مصماتات والضد قل، مهموسها فحثه شخص ساكت، شديدها لف وأجد قاط باكت، وبين رخو وشديد للعمر، وسبع علو خصا ضغط قد حاصر، وصاد ضاد ضاء ضاء مطبقة، وفر من لب الحروف المدلاقة، صفيرها صاد وزاي سين، قلقالات قطب جاد واللين، واو وياء وسكينا وانفتاحا، قبلهما والانحراف صحيحا، في اللام والراء بتكرير جوعل، وللتفشي الشين ضاد استطل. How many minutes was that?
1 minute, 41 seconds.
1 minute and 41 seconds. Now, there's a reason why I actually said this. This is basically the syllabus has been taught for basically hundreds of years, since 830 Hijri, roughly. So when you think about it, if you really compress it, that's 1 minute and 40 seconds. To explain it really quickly would take maybe 5 hours, but to practice it takes years. People will say this is what you have to do when you do your ijaza as well sometimes. Like, you will have to memorize the poem and you have to recite to the sheikh and explain the meanings of the verses. Now, one big question that is thrown at me at what I just did now. There's a reason why I spent 1 minute and 40 something seconds of your time. What is the point of memorizing this Arabic poem? It doesn't make sense to me. And to that, I reply to you, well, what's the point of memorizing the Quran if you don't understand what it is? Does that make sense to anybody?
Yes.
Do you see what I mean? Because at the end of the day, what this Arabic poem has in common with the Quran is in the Arabic language. At the end of the day, to assume that, we're just going to get rewarded just barely by reciting something, people say, yes, brother, you have to understand Quran is ta'abbudi. I actually worship Allah by reciting the Quran. I'm like, that's perfectly fine, that's correct. We're not neglecting that. But at the end of the day, I cannot compare somebody that is just turning up to class, writing down information, and just repeating what I said, versus somebody that actually understands the concept, versus somebody that teaches. And as we know, these things do take time and practice. The best way to memorize them, obviously, is in poetry. But at the same time, I'm happy for you to write notes, which is why I tell people to write down notes. Because at the end of the day, to actually teach this, I had to write notes on every single page of my book that I have with me. And this has taken months to do. So if you're doing it without writing notes, it will definitely show in the recitation. It's that simple. So just take it easy. It takes ages to memorize these letters, but I might try to maybe say a few lines to make your life easy. For example, you say, oh, brother, I can't remember حروف الاستعلاء. I'll tell you to remember خصة ضغط قذ. Just remember that word in Arabic. And that's basically the bare minimum that you need. Or what's qalqala? We say قطب جد. So it can easily really be summarized. The rules are really easy to remember. Like I said, the poetry is 1 minute and 40 seconds. The hardest part is actually not remembering all of it, it's actually doing it. So don't feel bad if you keep making mistakes and you get it wrong. Just remember, keep practicing and we'll keep getting better, inshallah. So without any further ado, inshallah, we'll start with Surah Al-Sharh. We'll just do maybe a quick one around the class. We'll try to correct each other as we go and we'll see how we go. Yalla, bismillah. Any volunteers? Or actually, the way I'll do it, anybody that'll put their hand up, I'm willing to let them have a shot rather than getting everybody to read. So it's up to you. So no one wants to read 67?
I can,
Oh, yeah.
can go if you.
Go for it, bro. Yeah. When you're ready, inshallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا عنك وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب.
So for the ra, because the ra is probably the trickiest one, can you just go back to normally what we tend to do sometimes, especially for a Jaza class, we go back and we say the same ayah again, just to discuss you could say the rules of the letters coming from it. So can you just read ayah 7 again? فإذا فرغت.
فإذا فرغت فانصب.
All good. So this one, what we're trying to highlight here is the ra is a tricky letter. So one easy thing to remember about it in terms of the rules, ra, if it has a fatha or a dhamma, it's heavy. If it has a kasra, it's light. I'll explain the rules in detail later. They'll come after 20 or 30 pages because it's a few pages long. But the shortcut I tell people, the fatha and the dhamma, make it heavy. Otherwise, if it has a kasra, you have to break it. So you'll read it as
فرغ.
فإذا فرغت فانصب. So you see فرغ. So you kind of, when I slow it really right down, it's فرغت. So that's just something to remember. And you can see I'm letting it out only once because we said in the previous pages, the common mistakes that keeps happening is people say farra, or they'll repeat it more than once, or they over exaggerate it. You just let it out once. And you let it out heavy. فإذا فرغت فانصب. So that's just basically it, really. Alrighty.
فإذا فرغت فانصب.
Oh, Jazakallah khair, bro. That's perfect. All good. I'll pick somebody else, inshallah. Any volunteers for that page?
Yeah, I can try.
Yeah, go for it.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا عنك وزرك
Can you just say,
الذي
can you just say ووضعنا again?
ووضعنا عنك وزرك
Good. Yep.
الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب.
Try to repeat ayah 6 again.
إن مع العسر يسرا.
So this is the tricky thing about it. So محموسها فحثه شخص سكت. So the scene, as you can see, is highlighted in red. It's got a bit of hams that comes out of it. So as we said, hams is basically a little bit of air, but not too much. So you want to say it as in إن مع العسر يسرا. If you let out a little bit too much in that, and then it sounds like a qalqala. You see what I mean? So this is just minor feedback, basically. So you're supposed to let out a little bit of air, but not too much. Well, not a fraction too much. So,
جزاك الله خير.
Ismail, that's basically that one. Any other volunteers?
I think Brother Bilal and a few have
Oh
raised.
yeah, go for it, bro. Yeah, I can see the hands now. Sorry about that. Yalla, bismillah, brother Bilal.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا عنك وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب.
All good. So this one, I'll probably go back to ayah 4. So for here, what's the difference between the sifa of a that and a za for dhikr? So feel free to go back in the book if you want to have a look at it, just to get an idea. So the difference in sifat, what makes that za unique from za and vice versa?
I think in one the tongue will be lifted and other is just need to join the this front incisor, I think. Let me just verify.
Yeah, so with one, think of as one having like a th and one is more of a z, if I put it in English, yeah?
Correct.
Yeah, so in that case, how would you try to give number 4 a go? وَرَفَعْنَا لَكَ ذِكْرَكَ.
Yeah, let me recite. وَرَفَعْنَا ذِكْرَكَ.
Yeah, so with this one, as you can see, it's like, obviously, if you stick the tongue out a bit longer, then it makes it easier to say ذِكْرَكَ. So it basically changes the part completely just by using, just by shifting the tip of the tongue a few millimeters. So that's how it is. But alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair, man. I appreciate it.
Jazakallah.
Ajmaeen. Who else do we have? Okay, brother. I think.
Ustad, I'll go.
Oh, alaikum salam, bro. Yeah, go for it, man.
Yeah, sure. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا عنك وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب.
Awesome. Jazakallah khair, man. Just appreciate it, bro. Can you just, if you can you read that to me again?
Which ayah?
Ayah number 7. فَإِذَا فَرَغْتَ.
فإذا فرغت فانصب.
So this one, yeah, try to make the ra مفخم a bit more. فَإِذَا فَرَغْتَ. فَرَغْتَ.
فإذا فرغت فانصب.
Appreciate it, man. So yeah, basically, what's really tricky about it is, so you see the ra sometimes. We're going to cover separately, inshallah. We've got all the letters in one sifa, and then the ra on its own. But no, jazakallah khair, man. I really appreciate it. What you guys saw there basically is a nice example of a recitation that's well spaced in terms of timing, as we covered in page 66 just beforehand, mashallah. The most important thing is, it's not just about saying the ahkam correctly, but if you got the right timing of spacing between all of them, then obviously that's going to really make a difference. So jazakallah khair, man. Awesome. I guess this is it for now, or no more volunteers?
I can go for that, inshallah.
Yeah, go for it, bro. Bismillah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم نشرح لك صدرك ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا عنك وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب.
Here's something tricky, inshallah. So you got from ayah 1 to 4. What's one of the characteristics of the letter kaf? Feel free to go through the book if you have to, just to kind of explain the sifat of the kaf.
It has hums in it.
Yes, yeah. So the interesting thing about it, mashallah, is like obviously I'm having a few mic issues, so I'm not saying I'm listening to everybody 100%. Usually I've got my headset on, so I can correct every single detail, but basically I'm picking out one point each. So here, the most important thing is just the hum. So what will sound like, I'm going to over-exaggerate what I'm doing here. So let's just say if I'm reading, ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا عنك وزرك. So you see how there's a little bit of air? So feel free to let this out. I'm just over-exaggerating rather than going وضعنا عنك وزرك. Because if you completely cut the air out, what could the cow sound like?
So you asking me again?
Yeah, so if you completely cut the air from the calf, what would it sound like?
قاف.
Exactly, yes. So that's what we don't want to have. But alhamdulillah, feel free to. So that's when you think about it. Mashallah, that's a unique sifa. So you got two letters that are really close to each other. So if you can't remember all the sifat, you can probably remember the distinct sifat that the letter has. For example, like if somebody says what makes cat and qaf stand out? Like cat is light, qaf is heavy. If I say give me an example of a sifa, you can probably say, oh yes, kaf has got hams, qaf doesn't. So that's a perfect example. But no, jazakallah khair, man, I appreciate
Exactly.
it. All good, inshallah. So now I'll just flip the page. That way we can cover the other examples later on, inshallah. We'll get to that shortly. So somebody, inshallah, if somebody can grab page 68, that'll be great.
I will.
Go for it, bro. Bismillah.
Okay. Elevation, istala, and lowering, istafal. The Arabic letters according to the direction. Number 1, elevated. The sound rises to the roof of the mouth when pronouncing them. So those letters are Hussa, Dagtin, Kiz. Lower.
Yeah.
And lowered one, the sound doesn't rise to the roof of the mouth when pronouncing them. Rest of the letter, except these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, except these 7, all of are lowered.
Yeah. So anyone want any questions about what's the difference between elevated and lowered? Or we should be good.
Yeah.
Can you give example again?
Lot
Please,
of it's related to start like sound level. I mean, peak.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. No, that could be one way of putting it. Yeah, that's actually pretty good. You're saying about that, sir?
sorry, can you please repeat that?
Yeah, basically. So we said earlier, some sifats you've got opposites, and some sifat they're completely unique. So opposites, you got the elevated and you got the lowered. So mashallah, what was put forward here is qusadat and qidh. It sounds like, it's heavier, but something about the pitch that makes it different from the istifal letters. So isti'la letters, obviously all of them are heavy, and they kind of rely on obviously the direction of the sound where it comes from. So that's the one thing to remember is like the direction of the sound. Like obviously a characteristic of the heavy letters that you have to have this echo from the top from the roof of your mouth. But that's what we mean about elevated versus lowered letters. So hopefully that explains it. So yeah, feel free to carry on, bro.
Okay, the next section is the elevated and lowered according to the direction of sound. Number 1 is kaf, descent of sound for a lowered letter. Then qaf, rise of sound for an elevated letter.
Yeah, so if you look at the book, obviously you can see that the arrows are pointing to the roof of the mouth. But that's for the qaf. So it's coming from the roof of the mouth. But for the istifal, it's going between the tongue and the teeth and it's pointing downwards, like ka. The qa is like coming from the top of the roof of the mouth. So that's what we mean about musta'li. It's up high. With the ka, because I'm actually shrinking my mouth, I could say it with a small mouth, basically. I don't need to have that much air, like oh. I don't have to have a big gap in my mouth. It just goes, literally, it glides over the tongue between the teeth and comes out. So just that's one way to remember it in terms of, in terms of diagrams and arrows. So that's basically a small summary of isti'la and istifal, and just remembering khussa, dagd, and qid. Any of these letters means the letter is elevated. Next one is tafkhim. Carry on with tafkhim.
Yeah, tafkhim. Linguistically, magnification, applied definition. The definition is it is a fattening that occurs to the letter so that the mouth gets filled with its echo as a result of the narrowing of the throat and the rise of the sound of the letter up to the dome of the palate, which is the outcome of istala.
So I think it's self-explanatory. Obviously we're just going to glide through it because we covered it before. If you have any questions, feel free to stop us. Yeah. Tarqiq.
Yeah. The second is tarqiq. It is a thinning that occurs to the letter so that the mouth is not filled with its echo because the throat doesn't get narrow and the sound of the letter doesn't rise up to the dome of the palate. This is the outcome of istifal, means cough.
Yep. So that's basically, obviously, the most common ones you'll hear is tafkhim, tarqiq, make this heavy, make this light. We'll keep saying this on a regular basis. But if I'm looking after something specific, like, for example, somebody's saying qi really lightly, I say, mate, remember, it's not qi, it's supposed to be qi, and it's a bit heavier. So please, in this case, I'll ask you to do more elevation or more isti'la in your qa. So that's how you start off as beginners, as kids, they will say tafkhim and tarqiq, and then once you start doing, more advanced stuff, that's when we get into like, oh, okay, I need more istifal, I need more tafkhim of this, I need this sifat to be more prominent. Alhamdulillah, this is tafkhim and tarqiq. Do the next one, inshallah.
The shape of the mouth when pronouncing a heavy letter with its 3 harakas. So with the fatah, maftu, then mazmum with the zamma, and with the kasra al maksur. So all three, like what we say, like with 3 harakas, how heavy letter is pronounced. So the book has illustrated all of 3 with pictures.
Yeah, so the book has a general guide basically of what the fatha dhamma looks like. So for example, if I have a letter coming from one makhraj, if I say a, u, e, it's the same articulation point, but the reason why I have different frequencies is because the shape of my mouth and my tongue and lips is completely different. So one will sound heavier naturally and one will sound lighter. So something to remember, the sifa of the characteristic of the letter itself will have a role on it inherently, whether it's heavy or not. But also in the position where it is in the word and the harakat also affect it. You see what I mean? So in Arabic, when they teach you, like say when they're teaching English in Arabic and vice versa, as they do in university, they'll keep talking about the broken plural. The broken plurals are also referred to as a kasra, because kasra tends to kind of try to break something. And when you break it, it sounds weaker. So it's just something to remember later on. So now it's going to get interesting. Levels of tafkhim, go for it, bro.
I have one question. I think just to clarify, you did mention recently, like in a few minutes ago, with ra, like with dhamma and fatha, this will be a bit heavy, and with kasra, this will be light. So that's the general, or that was for ra only, or this is the general universal rule?
When we start as beginners, normally that's what we tell everybody, is like the universal rule for ra specifically, only the ra. In our style and hafs, the waw, the dhamma and the fatha, they make it heavy, but the ra, we say it as, with the kasra, we say it lighter. The reason why I say that that's the general rule when we first start is because you're going to have situations where we might have a sukoon, which is going to be, well, what happens when it has a sukoon? And for that, there's conditions. So we start off usually with the easiest rule first, and when they start getting more complex. But the reason why ra is the most complex letter, it's basically has 2 characteristics depending on the situation. That's why it's difficult. So And it's kind of like unique to every recitation, I guess. Not every qari, so every qira'ah. By qira'ah meaning every recitation. From the 10 approved recitation, they have certain letters that they work on or they emphasize. So for us, the ra can be muraqqaq or mufakham depending on the haraka on it and the letters that are next to it. Hopefully that answers it.
Yeah.
Any more questions about tafkhim or taqiq or what we covered so far? All good. Inshallah, we'll carry on. So I'll get you to, I'll probably grab somebody else to do levels of tafkhim. Now it's going to start getting really interesting. So feel free to stop us if something sounds completely crazy to you. Any volunteers?
Yeah, I can read for a bit, Sheikh, if you want.
You go, bro.
Levels of tafkhim of the elevated letters. There are two schools of thought among the scholars of Tajweed regarding the tafkhim of the letters of isti'la. The first school of thought is for Abu al-Azbagh Abdul Aziz ibn Ali as-Sumath al-Ishbili, known as Ibn Tahan, died 561 after Hijri. The second school of thought is for the leader of reciters, Muhammad ibn al-Jazari, died 833 after Hijr. Here are the details of both schools of thoughts. The one with the fatha, as in qala or qada. The one with al-dhamma, as in yaqulu. The one with the kasra, qila. As for the sakin letter, it is considered to have the haraka of the preceding letter. For example, يقطعون or سقناه شقواتنا. The one with the fatha followed by an alif. This is the level of tafkhim and of the isti'lal letters, the second school of thought. The one with a fatha followed by an alif, qala. The one with a fatha not followed by an alif, qada. Or have I read this? No, sorry. The one with a dhamma, yaqulu. The one with a sukoon. And the one with a kasra.
All good. So now I'm dropping the bomb right now. So any questions about this section so far? Because I definitely did have a few when I first started. Does anybody know what the levels of tafkhim are?
Not really, Sheikh, if you can please explain that.
Okay. So basically, we started off the course telling you these are the light letters, these are the heavy letters, and just try to keep driving to your lane. Now, as we know, when you're driving in the highway in your car, just because you're driving the same lane doesn't mean all cars go at the same speed. So likewise, as we said earlier on this page, a, u, e, it's the same makhraj, it's the same letter, but it sounds different depending on the frequency of the haraka that's on it. So just like how you got tafkhim and tarqiq, you got different levels of tafkhim. So basically, what the Sheikh is trying to say, there's 3 or 5 levels. So basically, a qa with a fatha, like qada or qala, will sound definitely sounds a lot heavier than qila. You guys see where I'm coming from?
Yes, alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh. Is this going to be... Oh, sorry, I'll wait for the question till after.
Oh no, you're right. Feel free to ask. I mean, since it's already there.
Is it going to be just naturally occurring because of the way we're reciting, or is it something that we need to consciously try to make more of, like more isti'la when we come into these categories?
Well, basically, think of it this way. Now, if you look at the diagram we have on page 70, we said the reason why a, u, e, one sounds naturally, even though it's a light letter, the reason sounds different to E is because there's more space in my mouth. But for E, it sounds broken. I use the most istifad as possible to generate the sound. So let's go back to qa. Qa has got isti'la. It's a fatha. But naturally, the fatha will have more isti'la because it's open compared to the kasra, which is more closed. You see what I mean?
Yeah, yes, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, so it's so basically what we're trying to do now is, like we've explained, there's heavy letters, there's light letters, but now we're saying even between the heavy letters there's different classifications. So that's what we're trying to break them down into. So does that answer everyone's questions about the different levels of tafkhim? Okay, does that not answer everyone's questions? I'm testing to see if people are listening now. I just said earlier, does that answer all your questions? And I'm asking, does that not answer your questions?
That answers the question, Sheikh. Jazakallah khair for me.
Thank you so much. Just absorbing the information, I think.
Oh, yeah, I know. Because the thing is, what we're trying to say at the end of the day, it's like, obviously, harakas at the end of the day, qa is heavy by itself. But as you probably know, let's just talk about, like, say, boxers, for example, or fighting divisions. Let's just say somebody's now fighting in the UFC in the heavyweight division. Not all heavyweights are going to weigh 90 kgs. Am I correct? You know, you're going to get one. You're going to get one that's 94. One is going to be 98. One's going to be whatever. So they have different classifications within the weight division. You see what I mean? So that's just something to remember. So second question, I'll ask all of you this now, since I think everyone's still trying to absorb it. There's a madhab. It says the first madhab and a second madhab. Why is there a madhab? What's a madhab in Qur'an? It's pretty obvious.
Like second opinion,
title.
like second opinion,
Yes.
like opinion.
That's interesting. Okay, that's good. So there's an opinion. Why is there an opinion?
Because there was no confirmed rules on it.
Yes. Okay. That's actually one way of putting it. That's good. Any other opinion? Why is there a madhab?
Is it the teacher's interpretation of what reached him?
Yes. Just teacher's interpretation. And how do you get a teacher's interpretation usually?
Do they have their own narrations, like their own chains that authenticate both schools?
That's actually interesting. Actually, that's a really good point. Okay, actually, in order to understand madhab first, I think we probably need to go backtrack a little bit. Does anybody in the class here have a background on, say, Imam Shatibi or Imam Jazari in particular? Who are the Imams? We need to understand first the Imams to understand what their madhabs are. You know, it's kind of like talking about madhab Hanafi and Shafi'i, but not knowing who is Imam Abu Hanifa or Imam Shafi'i. You know? So does anybody know anything in this group about Imam Shatibi specifically?
Just that he's one of the coders of Tajweed. I think he was the earlier one. I could be wrong. And he was like the Bukhari of the riwayat and Tajweed. Like he's the one who recorded it.
Yeah, that's definitely one way. That's definitely accurate. He's definitely one of the higher up ones up there. So it's Imam Shatibi. I'll just give you a bit of a rundown. So basically, all the riwayat of Quran that we have now, if a person, basically, the reason why they exist is because of ijazah. So unless, this is how I personally see it, having ijazah is basically saying, I've listened to this person from start to finish and I certify this is exactly how the Sahaba read and the guys before them and whatnot. And everything is recorded. Same thing has happened with Salah. We did the same thing for Salah and, whatnot. Salah, Zakah, these rulings. What happened was that different people, mashallah, they knew the art so well, they excelled in it, that they became the definition of the art. So, for example, you have Imam Hafs, who's doing our style narration. You got Imam Hamza, mashallah, you got the Waqf and Hamazat, he specialized in that thing. Mashallah, you got Warsh with the different types of mudud. So, mashallah, these 10 Imams, they became famous for their style and they received that directly from the Sahaba and they received the Mosul, which is really valid. What Imam Shatibi did later on, Imam Shatibi roughly is around, say, 538 Hijri, and Imam Jazari came later after him in 830, was they tried to do exactly what the 4 Imams of fiqh did, like Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. I'm not saying there's only 4 madhabs, by the way, there's more than 4 madhabs. What I'm trying to say is, just like how these Sahaba, Tabi'een, mashallah, the Tabi'een that came after them, they tried to compile everything together for fiqh. The same thing happened for Qira'at. So he had, mashallah, Imam Shatibi. He tried to compile, initially started with the Shatibiyya. He compiled the 7 narrations from the famous Imams that studied under the Sahaba. And then after him came Imam al-Jazari. If there's a madhab, it's probably because there's a difference of opinion, either because the Imam made an ijtihad, and ijtihad, by ijtihad, it means within the chain of narration. So this is authentic. Based on what they received, in order to make rules simple for rules that are easy for people to remember. So that's why they'll say, oh, there's a madhab that says this, there's a madhab that says this. This is different to fiqh because we're not saying fiqh, mashallah, has a flexibility where you're able to make your own ijtihad. And depending on changing times, you can change the rules accordingly to accommodate different things as technology and time progresses. With qira'ah, it's different. When we say there's a madhab in qira'ah, it specifically means it's somebody making ijtihad strictly within the text. When it comes to fiqh is completely different because we do not have a text that actually talks about a given problem, like genetic engineering, for example. So we're trying to resolve the issue by approximating whatever is left over from the athar, from the hadith, the sunnah, and the Quran, everything else. So you can think of it this way: although everything is received from Allah and we've taken it from the Sahaba and whatnot, do not confuse the word madhab of qira'ah to be the same as madhab Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi'i, and Imam so-and-so. Here it just specifically means a valid opinion. So but to get to that situation, oh mate, you need at least a PhD of some sort and some serious background to back you up. So that's basically it. Any questions about madhab in this context? On page 71.
Could you give an example of how like the imams might have differed over an issue? What was the nusus? What was their original start point and why they differed?
Okay, I'll probably use the example we have here in page 71. So here, basically, as we can see, Muhammad. Okay, let me try to find the Arabic text. Here we go. So we got Imam Ibn Tahan. So he came at 561 Hijri. So what's interesting about this, as you can see, is 561 happens to coincide, inshallah. If you look at the timings of the Salaf that came after, 538, 61. So you could say he was probably contemporary around the generation of Imam al-Shatibi. So I'm not saying they've met or they've taken each other's opinion, but obviously he had the valid opinion of, okay, you could only have 3 types of tafkhim. Big tafkhim, medium tafkhim, and little tafkhim. And the one that we're not going to talk about is sukun. So if you say qada, qala, these are heavy. Yaqulu, it's medium tafkhim. Then qila, And when you ask him what's your opinion, it's like, well, the qa with the fatha, there's a isti'la, or there's a natural gap between the roof of the mouth and the tongue when we do the fatha, and it's a qaf. These two things coinciding together, the isti'la and the qaf, make it the heaviest of the heavy. I'm like, okay, that's fair enough. What about qila? It's like, well, qila is the opposite. It's istifal. So it's a broken plural. So it's still the mufakham, but it's the weakest of the mufakham. So it's a straightforward opinion. It's not necessarily based on hadith or so-and-so, but it's by linguistic deduction from the Arabic language. Because as we said, Arabic plays a really important role in Tajweed. Imam al-Jazari, mashallah, he took it to the next level, as you can see. So he said, look, I'm not going to, because mashallah, he came after, so he came hundreds of years after. He had, mashallah, access to the books of Imam al-Shatibi. So he's actually completed the work of Imam al-Shatibi, mashallah, and he found even 3 more narrations. That's how we managed to get the 10 recitations. He even, mashallah, managed to find other turuq that weren't available to Imam al-Shatibi at that time in the Isnad. So he said, look, I was able to read the work of the generation of Imam al-Shatibi around 500 Hijriya and earlier, and even the Imam of Shatibi, Imam al-Dani. He said, based on my findings, therefore, the conclusion that Sheikh Imam ibn Tahan, the great Muqra, he came up with is really good. It's quite simplistic. It solves the issue of classifying different levels of tafkhim, but it doesn't answer the question of sukoon. So he said, based on the isnad that I have, the information that I have, and the knowledge I have right now, after reading more books, 300 years later, I can say that qala with the fatha is the heaviest because it's got a fatha on the qaf. But here he's saying, look, it's 2 things that make it really heavy. It's the fatha and the alif. You get where I'm coming from, bro?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, I see. It's very in-depth look at the
Yes.
language as well.
So he's
And
saying,
alhamdulillah.
yeah, so he's saying, look, I'm going to look at the letter, the sifa of the letter, the haraka that is relating to the letter, and the letter right next to it, whether it drags it up or down. So he said, based on my opinion, I agree with this imam. The heaviest is qala, but I have more reason to back that up, that statement. And then, mashallah, he goes back and he says, look, the next level after that is same thing. Qad, as you can see, the one next to it, there's a sukoon. So he's saying, look, same thing. Qaf still has a fatha, but it doesn't have a harf of haruf al-mad, for example, let's just say, or alif specifically. Then he said, then dhamma, but rather than saying kasra straight away, he included sukoon. People said, why sukoon? He said, if qila is the broken or breaks the letter and makes it sound weaker, then qaf makes the letter silent. So basically, it doesn't move it left or right. It stays still. So imagine qa is above the line. Shiqwatuna yaqta'un suqnahu actually holds it in place. But as soon as you put a kasra on it, it drops it. So here, his madhab, he has 5 levels. He has the qaf has to have an alif, fatha and an alif, then a fatha, then a dhamma, then a sukoon, then has to have a kasra. But the earlier scholars before him, his madhab was more simplified. It was like either fatha, dhamma, kasra. It's simple. It's simpler to understand. That's how you can get different madhabs within the same thing, but it's still the same chain of narration. They just have a different way of explaining it. So it's, mate, that's probably the most complicated explanation I gave of a different level of isti'la and tafkhim. So hopefully it didn't fry your brain already. I think I've already lost a few people already with this one.
Alhamdulillah, was jazakallah khairan.
No, it was all good. Alhamdulillah. It gave us also time to process it. So I think, inshallah, we are okay with it now. Jazakallah khair.
No, Ismail. Any more questions on the different levels of tafkhim? I'm not going to try to make it any more advanced. I mean, but alhamdulillah, as you guys can see at the end of the day, like this kind of demonstrates like if this is my explanation, I'm not even regarded as a 4-year graduate in Qur'an. You can imagine what it's like once you've done 4 years plus a master's plus a PhD. because at the end of the day, like, it is that complex. You will be sit down and be, not only, if the minimum requirement is to have somebody listen to you read the Quran from start to finish, then you're definitely going to have to explain yourself. And that's why there's people sitting there doing research, having different opinions. If this is just qira'ah, you can imagine what it's like for other branches of Islamic science as well. And alhamdulillah, it's good, because at the end of the day, it means there's people there actively working full time, whether they're paid or not, to protect the Quran and to provide, literature with regards to this, So, inshallah, hopefully that's basically explanation how you can get different opinions, even though it's the same as Snad. So it doesn't mean they're reciting it differently from each other. It's just they have different ways of explaining something. So hopefully I explained. Inshallah, I'll give you a break. I'll probably grab somebody else to read different levels of tafkhim. Oh, sorry. Page 72.
Were you going to choose someone, Sheikh?
Actually, you know what? I'll get you to read it really quickly, and that's it. I'm not going to try to explain it too much, because this is the matan by Sheikh Mutawalli is quite, it's quite advanced, to be honest. But yeah, it's past the scope of what I'm teaching at this stage. I don't even teach at Ijaz level, so we'll just read through it quickly.
The late scholar Sheikh Muhammad ibn Ahmad al-Mutawalli, may Allah have mercy on him, said about the levels of tafkhim for the letters of isti'la. Then the tafkhim letters come with 3 levels, and they are the one with a fatha, then with a dhamma, then with a kasra, and the sakin follows that which precedes it. So what comes before the sakin letter of a vowel, then assume for it the level of tafkhim of that vowel. And it is said, no, that the ranks of the tafkhim letters with a fatha followed by an alif, and after it a letter with a fatha without an alif. Then with a dhamma and a sukun, a kasra, so that is 5 mentioned to you. So even if they are in the lowest level, they have tafkhim, cut off from the lowered letters. So it cannot be said it has tarqiq like its opposite. That is the truth.
So basically, there's the Imam Mashallah Mutawalli is one of the most famous qurra hailed from Egypt, and it's not surprising if you've studied under Egyptian Qari to find a sanad that links back to him, mashallah. So he is basically a serious authority and heavyweight when it comes to actually writing books of Tajweed. So basically what he's trying to explain here in the poem is not part of the scope of this course, but we're just reading it for the sake of formality, so we've covered the book cover to cover. Basically, he's explaining there's different opinions, and these opinions are valid. But the reason why we lean towards Imam al-Jazari, because Imam al-Jazari is seen, as mashallah Brother Musa said, as, you could say, the mastermind of all the compilers. Like, you can think of him as, the closest thing we can call him is basically like Imam Bukhari, because basically he compiled every single thing. And that's why most qurra, you'll find they'll lean towards, we do study Shatibiyya, and obviously I had my ijazah in Shatibiyya. That's what normally everybody does. But what you will notice with the work of Imam al-Jazari, he doesn't digress away from Imam al-Shatibi. He actually builds on his opinion, to the point that when you study qira'at, you have to study everything the Shatibiyya and the old school, as it's called. And then once you graduate from that, then you do the new school and you do what Imam al-Jazari said. So it's it gives you a different perspective, because mashallah he's done that much research. Yeah, but I'm not going to try to cover the later scholars like Imam bin Twali and Labad. It's basically research and development type of stuff. Inshallah, I'll try to pick on somebody else now. So we'll start with I'll probably grab somebody else for the Arabic letters for page 73.
If no one is available, I can read.
Yeah, I can.
Please go ahead. No.
The Arabic letters, elevated and lower letters. Elevated letters, as we said before, Hussa, Dog, Tin, Kiss, always heavy, and lower letters, rest of the letters, sometimes heavy, Alif, Lam, Ra, always light, the rest of the letters. The rule of sorry.
Yeah, so basically we'll cover that later. Here, alif is not, we don't mean by hamza, like here's the alif madiyya, the one that you put after the mad. Lam Lam has, yes, Ra does have two characteristics, heavy and light. Lam does, but they're easier to memorize. Ra has at least about 8 rules. That's why it's the most complicated letter in Hafs. But yeah, it's Lam and Ra. They, depending on the situation, they can sound heavy or light. Inshallah, we'll carry on with the next one, the rule of the letters of
The
Alif.
rule of letter Alif. The Alif follows the letter which precedes it concerning Tafkhim and Tarqiq. It is made always heavy after a heavy letter, as in Khalidina, Wal Qaimina, Waladdallin, Minallahi, Yura'ud. And it is made light after a light letter, as in Bismillahi, Qul Iyyaka, Minas Samai, An-Nasi.
So yeah, so basically the Alif Maddiya here, if the one before it is heavy, it becomes heavy. If it's light, it becomes light because it's actually an extension of the sound that's before it. Alhamdulillah, that's the Alif explained. The next one, the shape
brother,
of the,
can I
go
ask
ahead.
something?
Go
Yeah,
ahead, bro.
in the Arabic letters, when it says lowered, that goes on to always heavy. Is the heading mixed up? Because 2 pages back we said the elevated ones were the Husa, Daktin, Kiz, and over here it says the lowered are these ones. So what am I reading wrong, or am I missing something?
Here we're talking specifically about the Alif Maddiya and the Lam and the Ra. So here it's
The for the
yeah.
Arabic letters, it says lowered and elevated. The lowered ones are the Khussad, Daftin, Qitta. But on page 68, the Arabic letters according to the direction of sound, the elevated ones are the Khussad, Daftin, Kis, and the lowered are the rest.
Oh, I see. That's
So
interesting.
which one is the correct one? I mean,
قصة ضغط قذ. I think what's happened here, ضود مستعلية. Oh, I think there's a translation mistake.
so it's still the elevated one.
Yeah,
The first one is elevated,
yeah.
and the second.
Well, yeah, that's actually a good point. If you guys have a pen and paper, correct this. So مستعلية is actually elevated.
Okay, so English is elevated here. So
Yeah, so the box, box on the left, مستعلية, it says lowered. It's actually supposed to be
elevated.
elevated. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a translation mistake. And the elevated, it says mustafila. Mustafila is supposed to be lowered. So the box on the right hand side should be, in English, it should be lowered. And the one on the left is elevated.
Jazakallah.
No, Jazakallah khair. That's nicely spotted. So elevated means always heavy.
Ustad,
yeah.
Ustad, the book I have, I think it's correct.
Oh,
okay.
Okay.
Okay, the version I have then is old version, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think maybe because I know there's different editions as well, so it might be a recent thing that's been corrected.
If the new edition guys find something else different than what we're reading, please let us know so that we can change in our book as well. Jazakallah khair.
Yeah, so basically, if you're again, and this is really interesting because people ask me, "Oh, brother, why is it that in order for us to study Qur'an, we have to study Arabic?" And I tell them, look, it's to avoid mistakes like this. How could you double check? Because here, I can't tell because, inshallah, I'm switching between Arabic and English, but I can definitely see from the Arabic is 100% correct. There's no translation mistakes. But in the English, the English, I think they mistranslated it. They swapped it around. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair for spotting it.
And the shape of the tongue when pronouncing the heavy and light alif. The heavy alif is accompanied by a curvature in the middle of the tongue and narrowing in the throat, contrary to the light one. So the heavy alif is on the left and the light on the right side. And we can see there is a curvature in the middle of the tongue on the heavy.
Oh, good. Alhamdulillah. That's perfect. We'll carry on to the Lam.
The rule of letter Lam. Arabs unanimously make the Lam heavy in the name of Majesty Allah. when it is preceded by a fatha or a dhamma, as in Huwallahu, Sayu'tinallahu, wa izkalullahumma, wazkurullaha. The rule of letter Lam. However, when the name of majesty is preceded by a kasra, the lam remains with its original lightness, as in Bismillahi, Afillahi, Shakun, Kullillahumma.
Okay. Any questions about the rules of lam? Does anybody know when the lam's supposed to be heavy or when it's supposed to be light?
Isn't that a bit similar to the Ra as well, to some extent?
Yeah, with this one, yeah, what's different about it is you look at the letter beforehand, specifically for the lam. So basically, if the lam, you don't necessarily look like it's called here. We're talking about Lafz Jalala specifically. So here, when it says anything with regards to Allah, Allahumma, by default it's heavy. But if you before it comes a kasra, like Bismillahi, Afillahi, Walillahumma, in this case, it actually becomes light. So that's basically the ruling on Tarqiq and Tafkhim for the lam, specifically for the word Allah. Yeah,
Yes, I had this confusion till a very old age as well. When I arrived here, I used to think that all lams with fatah and dhamma are tafkhim. So later on, I realized it's only with Allah specific. Then the rest of the lams are just normal lams. They're not thick.
yes, yeah, because mashallah, this hukum, when you look at it, it applies to a specific word. It's not a general rule. So it's good that you pointed out. So yeah, so just the main thing to remember with the word Allah, if you see, if before it comes a kasra, it's always light. That's number one rule I tell people. So inshallah, I hope that explains it. Any more questions about the alif maddi and the lam? Okay, alhamdulillah, it's good. We'll carry on.
And the shape of the tongue when pronouncing the heavy and light lam. The heavy lam is accompanied by a curvature in the middle of the tongue and the narrowing in the throat, contrary to the light one. So there's a picture here, light on the left and heavy on the right.
Perfect. Okay, now this is going to get to become the fun one. Any volunteers want to do this one? Probably what I'll do is I'll intentionally finish on page 77 because you're definitely gonna start sweating after this. So yeah, any new volunteers? That's why I'm getting a new person just to read that part.
It's page number 76, right?
Yep, that's the one.
Sure, I'll try. I'll read.
Bismillah.
The rule of Ra. The letter Ra is made heavy in 8 cases. It is made light in 4 cases. Both ways are permissible in 2 cases. The case of tafkhim for Ra, when the Ra is with fatha, as in Ramadan, when it is sakina and preceded by a letter with fatha, as in Maryam, when it is sakina and preceded by a sakin letter other than aliyah, and that is preceded by a letter with fatha, as in wal asr, when it has dhamma, as in kafaru, when it is sakina and preceded by a letter with dhamma, as in al-Quran, when it is sakina and preceded by a sakin letter which is preceded by a letter with dhamma, as in khusr, when it is sakina and preceded by an incidental kasra, whether pronounced or implied, as in arji'u alladhi irtada lahum. Number 8, when the ra has sukun and it is preceded by a letter with kasra and followed by an elevated letter with no kasra in the same word, as in qirtas wa irsad, فرقة.
Okay. So everyone's all right, expert now? Or any questions? I was waiting for that. I remember having an interesting talk with one of the brothers, the finished khitmah of the Quran over in Auckland about this recently. So, I know it's hard to remember everything. So basically, these are 8 conditions where the ra has to be heavy. So I gave you a simple rule. I said if it has a dhamma fatha, it's heavy. Otherwise, it's light. Here, this is basically all the rules. Any questions about any bullet points so far before I start reading?
It's actually interesting because the last 2 points, 7 and 8, I had no idea about them. So I'm completely new to that.
Oh yeah, it's definitely, you're always gonna get something new with the rock. So it's I'll get to 7 and 8 anyway. But any questions about the earlier ones?
So, Ustad, the poem you read it earlier, all these rules are covered in that poem?
Oh no. The what I read was actually 2 chapters from the entire poem. So the whole poem is 109 lines. I just read maybe about 30.
Because we need some sort of like a summarized shortcut to memorize everything. Otherwise, it's gonna be mission. Like,
Yeah, like I said, it's not a memorization competition. I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, this is basically to help facilitate, reading tajweed. At the end of the day, it's like if you can read it start to finish, it's not an issue. But mashallah, this sticks in the head with practice. That's why I tell people, look, if you can't memorize 100 lines,
yeah.
and trust me, it's really hard to memorize because I had to recite it to a sheikh. Because the thing is, even if I recited it to the sheikh, he'll be like, oh, okay, so what does farra min lub mean? Because my ijaza license, I have an unrestricted license, which means I'm expected to be on my feet to be able to explain every single line. So memorizing it will take months, let alone explaining it. So, like I said, it's the whole bab or chapter as it is like what 1 minute and 40 seconds. That's like what 40 plus 60. I basically read the rules out to you in 120 seconds. But as we know, it's like now we're getting in depth. It's we're giving it a bit more time, a bit more detail. Don't stress about it. These things happen. But at least if I can send a message to people that look, this is what real tajweed is about. This is what is actually taught at a university level. And let's just say you don't remember anything next week. At least to make you appreciate why the ra is different compared to other letters. You know what I mean? So this is different because I'm not testing people here for ijaza, by the way. If you're doing an ijaza under me, heck yes, you have to cover this. This is a syllabus. If you're going to come and say, brother, I want to get an isnad from Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, a directly connected chain, I've memorized the entire Quran, what should I do? I'm like, here's your book. Because that's the expectation I have for my ijaza students. But this is just basically, mashallah, a nice preview. And as you guys are aware of Tackle Quran Club, we have programs, inshallah, been running for over a year now, mashallah, just to kind of help practice these rules. So don't feel bad if you don't remember all of it at once. Some of these things, we're still going on about with other mashayikh. But like I said, if you can master this book, you're a full qualified teacher, if you can memorize it. But that's not my expectation, you know what I mean? So don't feel bad if it's taking a while to digest. Mashallah, you can probably come back next lesson and it'll make sense, So inshallah. Any questions about the art so far? Okay, what I'll do, I'll read it line by line. Feel free to interrupt me if anything doesn't make sense to you. So, general shortcut when I do my what's his name? Learn Tajweed rules and guaranteed 90 minutes. I tell people, look, in that program, because I'm teaching a general public, I've got parents, grandmas, everybody, young kids. I say, look, just remember the Fatha and Dhamma, that's it. And because of the sake of marketing, I'm keeping things simple. For students of knowledge, I'll give them the real deal. This is what you're getting. So here you're getting the full 8 rules. So in addition to what I already mentioned and what the rules, mashallah, some of you already know, there are other rules to remember where the ra has to be heavy. Number one, you already know, it has to have a fatha on it, like Ramadan. Number two, it has a sukoon on it, but the one before it is a fatha. So this is the thing to remember. If for whatever reason there's a sukoon on the ra, always look at the letter before it for a hint. Just like how we did with Lam and Jalala, we said Allahumma. If there's a kasra, Bismillahi, you look at the letter before, oh, it's a kasra, I have to change it. So here, let's look at number two. It says, if it's the letter is a sakin, it has a fatha before it. It's still heavy. So to memorize it as a shortcut, if it has a fatha on it, or the letter beforehand has a fatha and it's a sukoon, it's heavy. An example here, they have Maryam. You don't say Maryam. Although it's valid, it has a sukoon. Maryam. That's why I say when I'm speaking to Arabic people in Arabic, oh, where's Maryam? I put a sukoon on the ra. But like we said, there's different levels of tafkhim. Maryam is pretty flat. But to say a proper mufakham or heavy ra, you have to say Maryam. Maryam. See what I mean? Because now we're applying the rules of the different levels, as we said. Number three. When the letter is sakin, is preceded by a sakin letter. So this is tricky. You've got the ra, you got a sukoon. You're like, brother, okay, you just told me to look at the letter next to it. The letter next to it, you're thinking is a fatha dhamma kasra. Oh my God, it's another sukoon. What do you do? In this case, you look at the letter before that. So you're allowed to go back twice. So this is what you do. Like Maryam is easy because you go back one letter. But with wal asr, you got a sad that's got a sukoon on it. You got a ra that's got a sukoon on it. That's simple. Don't freak out. Go to the one next to it. Oh, it's a fatha. Okay, simple. Now I go back to the ra and make it heavy. And the fourth one is pretty straightforward. Kafaru. Ra has got a dhamma on it. So it's pretty right. Any questions from bullet points 1 to 4?
Ustad, in number 3, they mention like other than alif, lam, ya, hamza. So means if the letter, like in case of wal asr, so we have ayn before sod and ra. So if we have something like ya is coming, so the situation will be changed.
Yes, yeah. I'll get to that inshallah later. So because it's I don't know if you guys can see past page 77. Past 77 is still going for a couple of pages about the ra. So yeah, we'll get to the ya in a second. But here he's trying to simplify it. Yeah, so you nicely spotted. The ya, yes, there's a different case. But here, yeah, if you see a ra, it's got a sukoon on it, and the letter next to it is not a ya and has a sukoon, then go. But you're allowed to jump a third letter. So hopefully that answers it.
Sheikh, I've got a question, quick one, please.
Go for it.
So again, it's on the same point number 3. If in this case the sad is one of the huruf al-isti'la, so it's easy to make the ra mufakhama. What if the sad is one of the huruf al-istifal? How would you pronounce that?
It's actually a good point they point out, because sad, you got huruf istila. We'll get to that, I think, I remember, inshallah, your point, brother. I'll get back to you, inshallah, point 8, because that what you're saying is really valid as well. But yeah, in this case, it's harf istila. It does play a role, but we'll get to that in a second, inshallah. So you're basically saying that what if the letter changes characteristic of the ra?
Yeah, because it will be easier to make the ra here mufakhama because of the one before it is one of the huruf isti'la.
Yes, exactly. That's perfect.
But then if it's, yeah.
What we do in this case, for the simplicity of asking, we tell people we try to separate it into bullet point 3 and 8 to be really specific, because there are some cases where you look at the letter and you go, okay, we're not going to like talk about isti'la or istifal. It's easy just to look at it as 2 sukoon and go to the next one. There are specific words, and this is actually in Jazariya. Let me remember. In bullet point 8, it does actually say it another poem later on. والفرق والخلف. Oh yes, so the word firq here, basically there is difference of opinions, and it gets into madahib. So what we tell people, look, to make things a bit easy for the student, if it's two sukoon and it's not a ya, ignore it and go to the third one. Because of firq and the likes of isti'la and qirtas, we'll cover this as a separate bullet point. But what you're saying is perfectly valid, mashallah. That's you're actually reading ahead, so jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair.
Ajma'in. We'll get back to you in a second, inshallah, but don't worry about it. Kafaru. Any more questions from 1 to 4?
It was actually my son who pointed this out to me, so I just passed that to him.
No, alhamdulillah, that's perfect, man, because we're going to cover that in point 8. It's coming, inshallah. Inshallah, I'll carry on from 5 to 8, and then we'll bring it up. Bismillah. So here, when in the sakina, in the case, you got a ra that's sakin. So we said, yeah, if the ra has a dhamma, you'll cover it. If the ra has a sukoon, same thing. You look at the one before it, it's not a fatha, but it's a dhamma. It's still, you read it, mufakhama. Al-Qur'an. That's taking care of that. You got same thing with khusr, or point number 6. You got ra has a sukoon. So you go, what's next to it? Sin has a sukoon. You go, what's next to it? It's a kha with a dhamma. Oh, perfect. In this case, we read it as khusr. And we make it khusr, as opposed to ri. So just remember that. So when you look at number 1 to 6, same thing. You know, it's like if the letter has a dhamma or kasra on it, or if the letters beforehand have a dhamma and kasra, it becomes, heavy. 7. When it's sakina, the ra is sakina, it's preceded by incidental kasra. So here in incidental kasra in Arabic means إذا كانت الراء ساكنة وقبلها كسرة عارضة. So that's the word to remember. كسرة عارضة. It's not normal to have a kasra. What does that mean? I'll read it. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الذي ارتضى لهم يرجو. يرجعوا. So here I'm starting on Hamzat al-Wasl. So what's happening in this case, in this context, I have to make a kasra because I can't start on it in a sukoon case. So I actually break the Hamzat al-Wasl. And as a result, the ra, this will get explained in detail. If you don't understand the rules of Hamzat al-Wasl, don't freak out. It gets covered around page 100. But basically, because I'm starting on, you got Hamzat al-Wasl, الذي ارتضى له. In this unique case, you have to make it heavy. So just remember that. If there's Hamzat al-Wasl and the ra has a sukoon, you make it heavy. Number 8 is the one that is really interesting. When the ra has a sukoon on it and it's preceded with a kasra and followed by an elevated letter with no kasra. What does this mean? So basically, remember we talked about huruf al-isti'la, the letters that come from the top. Khussa, daqin, qidh. These ones are heavy. And because of their characteristic, imagine sitting in the bus. You got 2 big guys and you got a small guy in the middle. You're going to get squashed. Same thing when it comes to pronouncing words. So what happens? You can't say, you can't say irsada. You say irsada. You can't say qirtas. You have to say qirtas. Because if you say qirtas, you're breaking the ra so much that it's getting harder to actually say the ta properly. And as a result, the ta, in order to be a proper ta, it needs to be elevated. But because you broke the ra, you broke it so low, it's hard to get back up again to say the elevated ta. You see what I mean? Same thing with firqa. Firqa. So here, you can't break it even though the one before it has a kasra. So this is exception to the rule. So think of it this way. Number 8 is exception to the rule. If it is followed by a letter of isti'la, then in this case, we give precedence not to the haraka, but to the letter. So 8 is the exception. So 1 to 7, you look at the letter. If it has a fatha or dhamma, you make it heavy. If the ones before it have a fatha or dhamma because it has a sukoon, you still make it heavy. You got an exceptional circumstance where you start on hamzat al-wasl, or you got irtada lahum irji'u. In this case, you make it heavy. Rule number 8 is exception because we're not looking at the one before it, because the one right after it is a really heavy one. Think of it this way. I tell you, mate, this is a 50 kg box. Unless you're bloody good at deadlifting, you're not going to lift 50 kg straight. You're going to need to get yourself ready. You're going to squat and get in position, and then you're going to plan your lift and lift with as much force as you can. Just like how you're trying to lift a really heavy letter, a really heavy box, you cannot break the ra because you're trying to lift a very heavy mufakham letter that has isti'la. So as a result, number 8 is the exception of the rule. Alhamdulillah. I think that's enough for today. I've Friday enough rains. So that's basically a whole summary. Any questions so far from bullet points 5 to 8?
I have a question regarding number 7. Like we mostly recite this in Surah Fajr. Ya yatuhan nafsul mutmainna. It's actually dhamma mutmainna too. So then we say irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiya. So that is the same case. This one irji'u, the number 7.
Oh, that's interesting. In turji'i. Well, in this case, are you talking about wasl between two different verses, or?
Yeah. So that is that. I just want to understand about incidental kasra. So that is alif. I mean, what is that? Irji. We normally say irji, though it's not.
Okay.
There is no harka normally. I'm talking about Usmani script. Sorry, the Indo-Pak one. So I have to check the other one.
Specifically, I don't know about the Indo-Pak one, but as you're aware, the current script that we have today, whether it's the Arabic script or the Indo-Pak one, it has, regardless of who wrote it or whatever it looks like, the main rule is that it has to comply not with the Uthmani Arabic script or the green Mus'haf. It has to comply with the copy of the Mus'haf. When we say Uthmani, it means it belongs to Uthman al-Affan specifically. It has to match that one exactly. So the rule about the wasl and the qata is really interesting because at the end of the day, when you look at these cases, I'm looking at the word itself. Just the main thing to remember, the cases for tafkhim and dhara, you are looking for the fatha or the dhamma within the same word. You see what I mean? So
yeah. Sorry for interruption. I found it actually in the app. It's a problem with that the script. I mean, same like in writing style. I found in one of the Quran app, which we normally we use. It's exactly same that is written. So looks like same example. I thought it's a different one because nothing was there, but here is mentioned exactly. They have wrote in the same way with kasra.
Yeah, so just the easy thing to remember in this case, whether you're linking from the harakat from the last verse or whatever, to make it really easy for everybody, just look for the harakat within the same words. So it's with all honesty, if you start looking at harakat from other words, then you're probably looking at other qira'at as well, or something. It's a bit of a complex thing to do. We don't really cover it for the syllabus, but yeah, jazakallah khair for pointing it out. So yeah, just a general rule, irji'u, irtada, just read it as if don't worry about the harakat coming from the other word beforehand. Just look at the actual word and look for clues for that. And if you're starting on hamzat al-wasl, then in this case it has to be heavy. If the ra has a sukoon on it. So inshallah that answers it. Any more questions about the bullet points?
Just a quick one, Sheikh, for number 6. Here we've got khusr. The scene is like a istifal letter, right?
Yep.
And it's sort of, but we have to make that light in between kind of two heavy letters. Is that correct?
Well, seen on its own is a muraqqaq. But if it has a sukoon on it, it's a muraqqaq sakin. Basically, it means it's a light letter that doesn't move. So think of it this way. You've got, for lack of a better example, people are going to start laughing. You got like a really fat 150 kg guy, and you got a small girl that's about 8-year-old girl that's 20 kgs, yeah? They can be jumping up and down. But regardless of how jumping the up and down, the fat guy will always be fat, and the skinny girl will be skinny. You see what I mean?
Yep.
But when they get tired, they're going to stop. So in this state, even when they're stopping, the heavy guy is going to be 150 kgs in a stationary state, if we're talking physics, and the skinny girl is still going to be still. So that's the difference between khasara and khusr. It's just sukoon, basically. So the sifa still stays the same. And that's why I tell people, like, it's kind of like, some people say, oh, yes, if it's a ra and it has a sukoon, let's look at the sifa of the one on the right of it. It really makes it complicated. It's easier to actually say, look, if that one has a sukoon as well, look at the harakat. Don't look at the sifa. Because as we said, the harakah gets priority in terms of, let's make it easier for everybody. Ahead of the word, if you're looking at the letters ahead, if the harakah is heavy, then the ra becomes heavy. But after the ra, the sifa is given the priority. If the sifa of the letter is heavy, then that controls the ra. You see what I mean?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair.
Yeah, so that's why we simplify. It's these 8 bullet points are really difficult. You can easily cross out a few of them. If you remember, it has to be a fatha or dhamma, or the ones before it are fatha or dhamma. That's 4 crossed off instantaneously. But the ones after it are more complex because they require you to understand the inherent understanding of the sifat, which means isti'la, istifal. And that's why they get taught at a later on stage. And once you master these, then it makes it easy. So basically, rules 7 and 8 override because, like I said, if the letter that's coming afterwards is really heavy, there is no way you're going to lift 50 kgs straight if you're in the air. You have to get down as close as you can to the ground and lift it as high as you can. So I hope these physical demonstrations online have made it easy in terms of people able to relate to the ahkam, the ra. The ra is the most complex letter. And like I said, there's even ikhtilaf between the madahib on how it's pronounced. So it does take time to sink in, even at an ijaza level. I have huffaz, people that have memorized the whole Quran, that know the harakat inside out, and the waqf and the whatever, all the ahkam, but they're still debating this thing about the ra. So don't feel bad if you find you're questioning yourself. You're starting your learning journey. Inshallah, this is the beginning to something big. What you'd rather start now than later, because what this means, mashallah, the next 5, 10, 15 years of your qira'ah, you're going to be refining these rules and becoming a master qari. But if you didn't pick up the book, you'll probably be with the kids' classes as unfortunately most of the population is. Because that's what happens. We never pick up the Quran after Nurani Qaida, let's be honest. Unless somebody dies on a Ramadan or, it's a special occasion, you get an Iman boost. But alhamdulillah, at least you're experiencing it on a weekly basis, at least. So inshallah, I hope I've done this sharh, this justice. It is a really heavy subject. Feel free to ask questions throughout the week. I will try to maybe, this is a nice point to stop our discussion for today. That way we can revise the rules of the ra for the next lesson. We'll talk about the next lesson we'll talk about the difference of we'll talk about more specific words that have ra hukum that only happens uniquely to Hafs and the different madhahib. And inshallah, we're going to move into some more practical examples later on for next week, inshallah. So yeah, just any more questions before we wrap things up?
Ustad, I have one question regarding ijaza. If you get a ijaza, so is there any validity, like it stays for a couple of years and then you have to recertify it? Because sometimes if you're not practicing, so maybe or maybe it's for the means lifetime certification.
That's a really good question in terms of validity. Is there a way of checking if it's valid? From my experience, so you're saying is there a time frame?
Yeah. So means is that like in our IT field, like if we certified for any certain field, so we have to recertify it after a couple of years to make sure we are we are up to the skill level which is required in the market. So the same thing is with the ijaza, means after getting ijaza, so it is for lifetime.
Oh, definitely. Like, I'll give you an example. This is what we tell people with ijaza. My mashayikh have said this to me, every single mashayikh, to be honest. I've either read upon or completely recited upon, or I'm still started reciting upon. All of them are saying read under different sheikhs. Because this is with the same style, by the way. What this means, mashallah, is you can get cross-examined. Not only does it build your reputation, but it builds your experience. And if one's lacking in one area, one will be able to cover you in the other. Now, the question is, how long is it valid for, and is it valid? I'm being brutally honest right now. You can lose your accreditation as soon as you walk out the door from the sheikh. You can lose it in 10 seconds, even after finishing the Quran. Min al-jinnati wan-nas. People say that seems extreme. Why is that? It's like, well, ijazas not all the same. They have different criteria. You've got the highest ones and you've got the lowest ones. But basically, you have different conditions you have to satisfy in order to be in your level of your certification. For example, let's just say, for example, I've got 100%. I'm teaching and I'm reciting to somebody and I know what the rules are, and somebody comes up to me and says, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهَ أَحَدٌ, or I say, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهَ أَحَدٌ. If I say it and I mean it, I lose my license automatically, and on the day of judgment, I will be actually at the front being asked, why did you teach this person that? You see what I mean? So it's basically, I get to lose it in different ways. First of all, I can lose it if somebody is more qualified. They can easily come. They can listen to my recitation. They'll be like, who taught you this? They'll be like, here's my snad. They can go and they can say, look, there's a fake certificate. Or for example, look, your sheikh knows how to read. You're not reading properly, or you're not practicing. Or they can just say, oh, you're making it up. It happens. Let's be honest. We're people at the end of the day. Sometimes in certain conditions, it could be the waqf, for example. Like somebody, for example, and don't get me wrong, I'm not picking on anybody here, but because I've been in international competitions, this is not said by me, this was said by the judging panel. One of the mashayikh said, if you stop at the wrong place that doesn't make sense to an Arab person, you will be deducted 30% automatically. No questions asked. We stayed quiet. Then one brother came. Don't get me wrong, this country has actually got one of the top 10 reciters internationally. The guy recited in Surah Al-Baqarah, and I think he was really qualified, or at Neo Ijaza level. He said, فَلَمَّا Bismillah. فَلَمَّا مثلهم كمثل الذي استوقد نارا فلما أضاءت ما حوله ذهب الله. What's wrong with that? I'll ask all 9 people, what is wrong with this recitation?
He stopped at the wrong place?
Yes.
Yeah,
What does that mean in Arabic? If you can explain to our fellow students.
Well, ذهب Allah, Allah went, but we don't know where. Is that?
Yeah, Allah went or ran away. So
Change
this was, it changes the meaning. So this is the first time in my life in an international competition Or I've seen a sheikh roll his eyes. I swear to God, I've never seen a sheikh. Have you guys seen a sheikh with a big beard and a thawb from Saudi Arabia roll his eyes?
No.
Anybody? Like imagine changing the meaning. You're turning up to an international competition and you're saying basically, Astaghfirullah, Allah ran away. Even if you had an ijaza, this mistake is so big because it doesn't make sense to people. So this is what I'm trying to say at the end of the day. To cut a long story short, ijaza has really specific part conditions. You have to be studying on a regular basis to maintain your accreditation. If you make a mistake, yes, people make mistakes and you get corrected. Even I used to get corrected when I used to lead Tarawih. That's not a problem. But if you're hell bent on something that is definitely not right, then you have to lose it. That's why people tell me, "Oh, brother, but this guy's a hafiz." I tell people, look, I studied engineering degree. I don't tell people I have, and I'm proud of having high school entrance because people will just laugh at you in your face. Let's be honest. Same thing. Hafiz is a minimum criteria. Understanding your hifz and reciting like the Sahaba is what we're trying to do. So if at any point you demonstrate that you can't recite like the Sahaba, or you don't want to recite like the Sahaba, or even you don't understand, don't get me wrong, because of your stopping and starting, you don't understand what the Sahaba are reading, you can really jeopardize the ijazah. And this could be years, this could be, a few seconds, and it's really hard to say, but yeah, subhanallah, like, it is actually a ni'mah from Allah to get one, because who knows if you're going to maintain it for the rest of your life. So the best thing we try to do as people that have ijazah is to read under more qualified people. I try to find a bigger sheikh. I try to push myself. I try to teach students, because one of the wasiyah of my sheikh, he said specifically, you will not understand your ijazah. Mashallah, I read the entire book in front of you to my sheikh, from cover to cover, and I finished the whole mushaf from cover to cover, and he said, you're not going to understand Tajweed until you start teaching. SubhanAllah. And now I get what he means. So, because now I have to I'm being asked questions. And, I have to, like, mashallah, when one of you guys asked me, oh yeah, is this thing actually mentioned here? I had to check every single isnad in Tayyibat al-Nashr, because I don't have a ijazah in Tayyibat al-Nashr. My sanad is Shatibiyya. Just to come back and say, look, I don't know this. So yeah, it's a big responsibility. It has to be practiced on a regular basis, but mashallah, as you can see, I've met brothers, wallah azim, I met brothers from Indonesia that can recite in the middle of the jungle, for God's sake. I've met 8-year-olds from Burma that can recite, that can't even recite Arabic. I've met a brother from Kyrgyzstan working full time, 4 kids, 26 years of age, and he's saying for every ayah I've memorized in the Quran, I have read 5 tafsir. So if these non-Arabs can do it, I'm pretty darn sure you guys have no excuse. And my sheikh was Indian, by the way, first sheikh. Guy came literally from India as well. So subhanallah, it is possible with the right amount of effort. If you put in 20 minutes a day, wallahi al-azim, Allah will make it easy for you, inshallah. I do apologize, brother Asar, we've gone over time today. It's been a really heavy session.
Oh, it's all good, mashallah. It has been really enlightening. Jazakallah khair.
Inshallah, but all I gotta say, just take it easy. These things come with practice. You might find that one of the Egyptian sheikhs I actually follow, this is more along the lines of Sharia studies, which is another thing I'm doing it on the side. Basically saying, look, sometimes it's not enough to read Bukhari from start to finish. Sometimes you have to read it 2, 3, 4 times to actually understand the hadith. And same's true as Qur'an, mashallah. So just don't push yourself. That's what I'm telling you guys. Like, I know some people, mashallah, are really enthusiastic. You guys might spend hours. Just do 20 minutes a day. Take it easy. You promised me 20 minutes a day, and I promise you, wallah, if you do this for the rest of your life, you'll be better than Laam. Dead serious. So may Allah make it easy for all of us, and I really enjoy teaching these classes. You guys really take it to the next level with your questions. So it's really good that we're having this healthy discussion over in New Zealand on an international level with all our brothers and sisters, and may Allah increase the knowledge of everybody here and the mahabba we have amongst ourselves, and help us invest in this relationship that inshallah not only carries on in this world, but will carry on in the hereafter, inshallah.
Inshallah.
جزاك الله خير شيخ. بارك
Jazakallah
الله.
khair. I will send the link of the Sunday bridging course that we are doing, where we recite with Brother Ibrahim a page or 2 page. So anyone from you interested in, I mean, if Brother Ibrahim is okay with that, so that anyone wants to practice these things with him as well, that can be done as well.
Yeah, inshallah. And I'll leave it to you, brother Suad, to sort it out. Hopefully, once we get, inshallah, the next intake, in case when Sheikh Hammer finishes, because I don't know if you guys are aware, there's Sheikh Hammer, he's more qualified than I am, so he does reading circles as well. So inshallah, once more opportunities happen with more mashayikh being able to, once their students graduate, be able to take on more people for other classes, inshallah. So yeah, stay in touch with the Tago Quran Club, and we'll keep you guys updated, inshallah.
Yeah. Jazakallah khair. Thank you.
Jazakallah, Ustad.
Ajma'in, appreciate it, guys. تسلم وسبحان الله وبحمدك سبحان الله وبحمدك اشهد لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك. جزاك الله خير. السلام عليكم.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.